spend your Sundays looking for something fun to do? Usually they're so drab and dull.
Boring.
We have just the thing for you. November 28th, the Old Rock House and Rock Paper Podcast present Debstock 2021, featuring music by Nick Gussman and the Coyotes.
Roll, Natchez, roll, till all my trouble lets me go. Roll, Natchez, roll, and carry away my soul.
The Screechin' Halts.
See, where we both know this is wrong, but I'm begging you on my knees, baby, please, to lead me on.
One-way traffic.
And that's all I've got to say. I know you've been missing me one day.
And Spank on Ya. It's Debstock 2021, November 28th from 3 to 7 at the Old Rock House, 1200 South 7th Street, St. Louis, Missouri. Tickets on sale at metrotix.com. Debstock 2021, a benefit for glioblastoma brain cancer. Brought to you by Old Rock House and Rock Paper Podcast.
Hey everybody, Shane Presley here, Rock Paper Podcast. Thank you for checking out another episode of the show. Today's features Andrew Wanko of Missouri History Museum. Had a great time meeting Andrew over there at the museum and getting to take a walk around their brand new St. Louis Sound exhibit. It's really quite remarkable to see it all come together now, and getting to learn a lot of new things and see some of my favorites, and it was just a really good time. It was a great day. So thank you to Andrew and the Missouri History Museum for having me out, and hope you enjoy our conversation. Do want to remind you, as always, Rock Paper Podcast is brought to you by Roughneck Beard Company and American Rambler, located here in St. Louis over in the Maplewood area on Manchester. Stop in and visit the shop or shop 24/7 at roughneckbeardcompany.com. Ladies and gentlemen, it's officially beard season with fall and No Shave November right around the corner. This is prime time to grow a beard, and Roughneck Beard Company has you covered. Using a good beard oil from day one of growth sets the stage for faster, fuller, healthier growth. Avoid dry skin and the dreaded beard itch by combining with Roughneck's Genesis for a vitamin punch that really gets things moving. Stop in today or order online to build your kit and kick your growth into high gear. Find all this and more at roughneckbeardcompany.com. Use my code RPP15 for an exclusive 15% off your purchase. Of course, that includes all your favorite products over there. Your beard oil, your beard balm, junk powder, or they got the Roughneck Beard Batter back. So check that out too, one of my personal favorites. You can find it all again, roughneckbeardcompany.com. Don't forget that code RPP15 at checkout. And you heard it from Tony at the intro, but I do want to remind you that we will be over at the Old Rock House on November 28th for Debstock. Obviously, this means a lot to me, very personal. Losing my mother in 2019 to glioblastoma brain cancer, and I'm just trying to do my part to help out some others in need, bringing along a bunch of incredibly talented friends of mine in One-Way Traffic, Nick Gussman, the Screeching Halts, and Spank on Ya. And it's going to be an incredible night. Tickets are $15 in advance, $20 at the door, and you can purchase those right now at metrotix.com. You can find more information, videos, links, and everything at Rock Paper Podcast /Debstock. So thank you, everybody that's already helped support this, and but let's pack it out. Let's raise a bunch of money for a great cause and support some others in need. So hope to see you all there. If you need me, of course, you can always find me at rockpaperpodcast.com. Hit me up on the email, rockpaperpodcast@gmail.com, any of the socials, whatever it is. I would love to hear from you. With all that out of the way, sit back, relax, and enjoy a brand new episode with Andrew Wanko.
A podcast is kind of like it's like a radio show that's not on the radio. It's on the internet. Does that make sense? Uh-huh. Yeah. That's also like my mom. It makes it sound more confusing, doesn't it? It sounds like this.
This is Andrew Wanko, public historian of the Missouri History Museum, and you're listening to Rock Paper Podcast.
Rock Paper Podcast.
Scissors beat paper, paper covers rock. Rock beats scissors, Shane covers non-stop. Never know what new kind of guest that he's got coming at you. Live and direct on the spot, could be rock, folk, country, or hip-hop, jazz. All kind of folks that he has. Could be an artist or a comedian to make you laugh on the
Rock Paper Podcast.
double-decker fudge round, rolling round town. Shane coming at you live and direct from ground zero. He's your hero, he's your bestie. Rock Paper Podcast with Shane Presley.
Rock Paper Podcast.
Hey everybody, Shane Presley here, Rock Paper Podcast, coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri. Hanging out today with Andrew Wanko over here at the Missouri History Museum here in St. Louis. And this is very cool, man. Thank you for doing this today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
This is my first time actually in the History Museum. I been seeing a lot of stuff online with this new exhibit that we're going to talk about with St. Louis Sound. And so I've been wanting to get down here and check it out because obviously I'm a super fan of St. Louis music and everything else going on around here. So, so this my finally got to get in here. I got to take the tour with you and got to have a lot of fun already today. So I'm glad that this is all working out.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm glad you're here too. St. Louis Sound is one of many exhibits that, we rotate through all of these exhibits that tell the history of St. Louis in really big and exciting ways. We've done exhibits on Route 66, on Victorian life in St. Louis. We've done exhibits on civil rights in St. Louis. But this one is the first time we've ever taken a big, wide-angle look at all of St. Louis's popular music. So it's pretty exciting. This is new territory for us.
Yeah. Well, let's. I want to kind of start with a little bit of your story, and then I want to kind of get it more into it because you had a big part in all this. So, but I wanted to kind of go back a little bit about you, like as far as growing up, like St. Louis always been home for you?
Yeah, so I grew up here in St. Louis. My background is actually in architectural history and like neighborhood history and urban development. And I was actually living in China right after I got out of college. It was 2010. Nobody was hiring any architects at that time. It was right after the 2008 financial crisis. And so I spent a year living in China. And while I was there, I found a copy of a book called Mapping Decline. It was written by Colin Gordon that sort of charts out what happened to St. Louis and why the city has seen such like a fragmented last 50 years and the sort of urban decay that has really been such a hard thing for the city to deal with. And I was totally enraptured by the local history here. I was in China trying to learn everything I could about the place where I had spent most of my life. Like life can be weird that way.
Yeah.
So when I came back, I got involved, ended up getting a job here at the History Museum back in 2012. So I've worked on all sorts of other exhibits, many of them dealing with like architecture and building history. But when we came up with the idea for St. Louis Sound, I was thrilled because I've always loved music in general, but in particular, I've always loved St. Louis music. When you go through the exhibit, you'll see Nelly's Country Grammar music video. I can remember exactly where I was when I first saw that music video on Total Request Live back in 2000. All of these bands, I've seen The Urge a half dozen times throughout, my teenage and college years. And I've had these sort of moments with local bands that have been really influential within my life. But it was such a privilege to get to learn about all of these musicians that I didn't know so much about. People like Scott Joplin and even Tina Turner. She's famous. I didn't know her local St. Louis story, though. So we really dove in deep with this exhibit and looked across the history of popular music in St. Louis all the way back to the earliest moments of recorded sound in the late 1800s. So it was such a treat for me to be able to put these moments from my own life into a much wider context. You know, like Nellie fits into a bigger story about St. Louis. And what you see time and time again is no matter what genre you're talking about, St. Louis has a massive story to tell. And without this city, American music today would sound very different.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. My story's fairly similar. But like my big like real introduction was like through local bands of the guys I went to high school with and stuff. They started playing out a lot more, and that kind of got my foot in the door with meeting a lot of bands going. And then like I really dove into around that similar time. I drove into like The Urge and Stir and Modern Day Zero and like, a lot of like the St. Louis rock scene of the previous generation, kind of like, but I was just like, I listened to, but I never got to see those guys live and stuff. And it was like, I missed out on seeing, we were talking earlier, The Urge and Mississippi Nights and all those stories of legend in now in St. Louis. And, but like, so I was kind of just too young to experience it all live, but so I kind of learned history myself, like through meeting these guys now, doing the show, getting to kind of go back through some of those stories firsthand with the bands, and getting to talk about, kind of archive some of that stuff. And so it's been fun to kind of live out a childhood dream kind of stuff through this.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And that's the really cool thing that I realized over the course of doing all this research was that the same moments you're talking about here, like there were these places and these bands that sort of a local scene congealed around in a really exciting way. And we sort of, I share that same like frustration that I was too young to have seen some of these.
Right.
Like you hear about the stories people tell about some of these bands and how exciting it was to be there. And when you look back through the genres and through the eras of St. Louis music, you realize that all of these genres had these kind of places. Like all the way back to ragtime, there was a place called the Rosebud Cafe, and it was the center of St. Louis's ragtime world. It was right across the street from Union Station before that was all cleared out in like the urban renewal schemes of mid-century. There was actually a whole saloon district right there next to Union Station called Chestnut Valley, and the Rosebud Cafe was sort of like the sun of the St. Louis ragtime solar system. Everybody crowded around this place. You had big national stars stopping in there. And when I love to look back at these eras of the past and really try to get that sense, what was this place like? It wasn't just that this music was being made here. It's that there was a very specific neighborhood and very specific people who were sort of big actors in making this all happen. So we tried to tell those deeper stories in the exhibit of places like Chestnut Valley. For blues music in the 30s, it was a neighborhood called Deep Morgan, which also doesn't exist anymore today. Gaslight Square in the 1960s. You constantly have these neighborhoods where things are happening in really big, exciting ways. And that's pretty cool that, you can like locate Mississippi Nights and some of these other places that are much more recent in with that wider scope of history.
What do you think? Like, you think it was just like a certain group of people that kind of helped curating that in that particular neighborhood? Or why do you think like there was like so much of that particular pocket right there where the hub of it all?
It's fascinating because you get these glimpses into much wider history. We start off talking about music history, but you end up talking about much wider social and cultural aspects. So I think one of the big reasons, like for instance, ragtime in Chestnut Valley, Union Station was the heart of the city in the 1890s and early 1900s. If you were coming to St. Louis, you came here by train. There were no cars on the roads of St. Louis yet. And so you would get off at Union Station and walk across the street. And as train stations tend to do, they collected this sort of world of bars and saloons and what they then called sporting houses, which we would now call brothels. And all of this stuff was right there sort of surrounding the train station because you had a constant stream of people coming and going, looking for time to kill, so they'd head over to a bar. So that tended to be where music flourishes throughout history. These are always the kind of spots where you see exciting musical things happening because you have a lot of people coming and going. So for ragtime, it was all of these musicians sort of, they got off the train, they could walk right across the street, and they'd be in this mix of people all doing these really exciting things. And, when you get a lot of creativity in one place like that, it sort of creates a critical mass. So people like Scott Joplin, he's easily the most famous ragtime musician today. He was one of many, dozens of people who made St. Louis their home and were publishing tons of different ragtime compositions here. The proprietor of the Rosebud Cafe was a guy named Tom Turpin. He was the first black, first African-American to actually publish his own rag in 1897, a rag called the Harlem Rag. So he was sort of like the living proof to all of these younger ragtime musicians that you could do this. Like, you could actually get a piece of music published. So he became almost like a father figure to the world of ragtime music in St. Louis. So again, it's really amazing to sort of rebuild these musical neighborhoods that once existed here.
Right. I was always thinking about the blues also in that how I kind of always was told everything kind of started in the Delta, and people gradually came up the Mississippi, and St. Louis was kind of just a natural stop on that trip to come up here and kind of call St. Louis home and develop the blues and what it was here and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the 1920s and 30s in St. Louis, there are dozens and dozens of blues musicians. Some of them were from here. We had plenty of homegrown talent that was, born and raised in St. Louis. But then you had tons of other people, just like you said, coming up. They had this movement that became known as the Great Migration, where thousands of Southern African Americans left behind, rural tenant farms, which offered very little opportunity to sort of build a better life. And they headed north for cities like St. Louis and Chicago and Detroit, where they could get jobs in large industrial factories that paid much better and sort of, had a chance of building a much better life for themselves. So naturally, a lot of musicians came along with them, or people who were working in factories by day, and they would, pick up their guitars and go play in the bars and saloons of St. Louis at night. So some of these musicians were huge. There's a guy named Petey Wheatstraw. He called himself the High Sheriff of Hell. This dude knew a thing or two about PR, even back in the early days of the recording industry.
What a name, man.
Yeah. Petey Wheatstraw was one of the 5 most recorded blues musicians in the entire country before World War II, despite almost never leaving his home of St. Louis. He recorded more than 160 record sides. He was a hugely popular and influential blues musician. A lot of historians think that Robert Johnson, who is seen as the quintessential Delta blues musician, actually kind of borrowed a lot of stuff from Petey Wheatstraw. Even The Devil at the Crossroads, that you can sort of see where Petey Wheatstraw was using that same sort of mythology here in St. Louis. And so it's fascinating, though, because he's not a name that is talked about much in blues music today. Right. A lot of those early musicians kind of have been overlooked by the people who have come since. But when you really look deeper at the music scene that was happening here, we had people like Henry Townsend and Robert Nighthawk and the Sparks Brothers, who actually wrote "Every Day I Have the Blues," which B.B. King has made his theme song, for most of his career. That was a St. Louis-based song. We have tons and tons of really fascinating local history. Mm-hmm. It can be hard to access, though, because similar to ragtime, the neighborhoods where this was taking place are now completely gone. They were sort of on the fringes of downtown St. Louis. In their own time, they were seen as little more than sort of, slums and neighborhoods to be avoided. And it's a shame that we have lost all of them since, because if they were still here, we would have a much deeper understanding of the local blues history that we really did have here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I don't know. I mean, even in my own town, you see how everything's changed over, from when I was a kid growing up, and how much of it's developed. Everything, there was all these fields or whatever, and everything's now neighborhoods and everything. It's just it's just crazy watching how the time changes everything. And
yeah, so. Especially in St. Louis, there are a few cities that have had the urban fabric more radically altered in the last 100 years. It's pretty amazing when you look back at sort of what used to be in some of these places and just how dramatic the changes have been. And unfortunately, that's been one of the side effects, is that we've lost a lot of that connection to our music history because the places just aren't there anymore.
Well, You guys did an amazing job of like collecting quite a few artifacts that we have preserved. Like I said, down here at St. Louis Sound exhibit in the Missouri History Museum, you can come in and like you said, some of these are on loan for the exhibit, but I mean, just like some one-of-a-kind pieces of history for sure.
Yeah, we have some really incredible stuff in the museum's permanent collections. We have a huge collection of artifacts here. And we have like Johnny Johnson's piano, Henry Townsend's piano, the stage clothing of Ron Townsend of the Fifth Dimension. That's all part of our permanent collections. But to really make this the robust, all-encompassing experience we knew it needed to be, we had to reach deep into the music community and search for these things, among private collectors. And the people who actually lived this history, a lot of times were who I ended up talking to and looking for artifacts that they had, just tucked away in their basements or somewhere. So, things like Tina Turner's dress from The Tonight Show, Josephine Baker's dress that we have on display. Those are loaned objects that came from the wider community. And every exhibit we do here is a collaboration between the museum and the community. We rely on the surrounding community for these stories and to give us the richness that we need to make these things come to life. But this one really redefined that. I could not believe how generous people were, how willing they were to share their personal history, both the artifacts and just the stories. People were telling me, some of these people I would sit and talk with for hours and hours, and they would just have so much to tell me. It became obvious pretty quickly there was no way we were going to get it all in. St. Louis just has way too much incredible music. Mm-hmm. So we tried our best to get a really wide array of artifacts, again, from the earliest moments of recorded sound all the way up to pieces from Mississippi Nights, which came down in 2007.
Yeah, you showed me, I guess it's kind of the first thing you see when you walk in, where it starts at the very beginning, but the tinfoil recorder.
Yes, that is such a fascinating story, and one that as we do this research for these exhibits, we oftentimes come across stories that we didn't know existed,
right.
And that was definitely one for me. So a couple years ago, I was just looking at a random article on The Atlantic, and it was about the oldest existing American sound recording that we can still hear today, and how they have preserved it, and how they actually got the sound off of this piece of tinfoil. And then halfway through the article, it says it was made in St. Louis on June 22nd, 1878. And my eyes got huge.
Right.
Like, what? It was right here? So I actually called the Museum of Innovation and Science in upstate New York, which is who permanently holds this tinfoil. And they were happy to loan it to us for display, which, just amazed me. It gave me goosebumps the first time I knew we were going to have this thing here in St. Louis for people to see. So the story there is, in 1877, Thomas Edison invents the phonograph, which is the first device to record and play back sound. And the way it worked was you hand cranked this machine and sort of shouted towards a cylinder with a piece of tinfoil wrapped around it, and a little needle would scratch the sound vibrations from your voice onto the tinfoil. So if you're like me, I can't get a piece of tinfoil off of the wrapper in my kitchen without it turning into a crumpled mess. So it's amazing that this thing has survived all these years and is in good enough quality that we can actually extract the recording from it. As far as I know, there are just 2 playable quality tinfoils in all of the United States. This is one of them. The other one's in the collection of the Henry Ford Museum in Detroit. So it's an incredibly rare artifact, literally from the earliest baby steps into recorded sound's existence. So, just think about what that means. Every recorded sound you and I have ever heard in our lives can trace back to this thing as a sort of common ancestor. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine my life without recorded sound. So to think that this thing is sort of the earliest moments, nobody knew sort of what the music industry would become or how popular music would explode in a million different directions and all these genres. This is really the very edge of all of that happening. And it gives me goosebumps when I really think about how significant that is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty wild stuff, man. There's I was having those kind of moments the whole time walking through there. Just it's just really neat to see it all, encompassed in one room like that, to where you start really kind of blows your mind a little bit to think about what was created here in St. Louis, first of all, and then how the ripple effect it's made across history since then. But you're walking through, you guys have you also have a display of from earliest recordings of vinyl records and everything to think about to the iPod and everything else, and like how that's all is weird for me to think about too, like how much the technology's changed, the size, everything went from being huge to tiny, and then like now we're going back to vinyl and stuff.
And like now we're at the point where music is essentially invisible. Like it's just streaming and floating in the air, but people are resurrecting some of these older mediums for the things that they can't get from streaming. So it's interesting to think about, like, where is music headed next?
Right.
It's a open-ended question that I'm sure no matter what it turns out to be will surprise us.
Yeah. But yeah, I had a lot of fun walking through the exhibit with you, and you can come down Tuesday through Sunday. We are closed on Mondays, but it is a free exhibit into St. Louis Sound, and you can come in and experience it all yourself.
There's a ton of information there, and so that's the best part. The price is right. The exhibit is absolutely free, so you can come back time and time again. You can take it in small chunks, or you can come read everything all at once. But we're so excited. I think we are offering people a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame quality exhibit, a Grammy Museum quality exhibit. And if you go to those places, for a family of 4, you'll easily spend $100 to go through and see these things. So it's so thrilling to me that we're able to offer St. Louis its own story for free. We can welcome in the public and really let them know what an exciting city that this is, and how crucial we are to St. Louis's, or to the United States musical heritage. St. Louis is a really important place.
Yeah. I mean, that's, not to toot my own horn, but that's really like the gist of this show was me. Like, I mean, I don't put a stamp on it that it's St. Louis music, because I like to keep it open to a variety of people that I've become friends with over the years. But really, that's the backbone of this show is St. Louis music, and all my friends around town. So I've been trying to do my part for the last 7.5 years of like shining a light on what we have here in town. With people, a lot of people, these are not household home, common names a lot of times, but in my opinion, they should be. These people there's all sorts of amazing things happening here in St. Louis that go overlooked a lot. So.
And a lot of these musicians are the people who they aren't just musicians. A lot of them are historians themselves. I was getting a lot of this information and research from local musicians who are really keeping these sounds alive and reinterpreting them for new things in the future. So that was really exciting to me, to get a glimpse into the wider music community as it is today. And I hope this exhibit helps to not just shine a light on our past, but also get people interested in St. Louis's musical future, because it is bright.
Oh, yeah. I feel like we're on a telethon now.
Yeah.
Like, phone lines are lighting up. Yeah, man. It's so I agree with you. Like, because that's again, doing the show. I love I've had like Alonzo Townsend, on. Again, he's a living, breathing piece of history, because he's gets to tell me the stories firsthand about his dad, and I find it fascinating, man, just to kind of get it right from the source like that.
And that's one of my favorite artifacts. We have Alonzo's father, Henry Townsend. We have his piano on display, and Alonzo was who donated it to us back in 2008. And when it came to us, it was actually in badly damaged condition. Somebody had broken into Henry Townsend's house after he died and basically vandalized the house. So somebody sprayed a fire extinguisher across the front of the piano. It's heartbreaking to see it. Like, you get this incredible piece from this absolute legend of blues music here locally, and such a thoughtless act caused so much damage.
Right.
So Alonzo Townsend and Marquise Knox, who he works with a lot, we actually hosted a fundraiser concert at BB's Jazz, Blues, and Soups that they put together, and raised money to help conserve the piano. That's such a special moment to me, because we're not just looking at this history from a distance. We're actually building new things here in town, and talking to the people who are making it happen again, carrying on Henry Townsend's legacy. And Marquise Knox is just one of countless incredible blues musicians that have called St. Louis home, no matter what era you're looking at. And to think that he is part of that lineage that stretches all the way back to the earliest moments of blues music as we know it.
Right.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. I think about it a lot, and this just goes to show, a lot of people the common people around town aren't really as informed about our history and stuff. But I had a buddy ask me one time, he goes, he's like, hey, do we have any good blues, any blues music in town? And I'm like, yeah, dude. We named a hockey team after it. It's a very big part of. So I gave him a quick little lesson, and I told him of course now it's closed, but Beale on Broadway was also another favorite of mine. We're getting to see a lot of great St. Louis blues down there, and BB's, and of course we don't have as many of these bars and venues like we talked about that really preserve the blues, but of course those are two of my favorites in town.
And if you talk, I think we take it for granted here what we do have. Like if you talk to other people who come to visit St. Louis, they're talking about you're down there seeing world-class musicians on a Tuesday night.
Right.
Like any night of the week, there's incredible music happening around town. But yeah, we really need to spend more time showing the world just how incredible it is here, because I think few places can probably match the scope of music that we have here, especially like a mid-sized city.
Sure.
We're competing with some much bigger cities than us.
Yeah. Well, Marquise is trying to do his part. I know he's been out there. He's incredible. He's a very talented young man, and he got to open up some shows with ZZ Top out there, putting his stamp on St. Louis history and stuff too. So I just think that's really a cool opportunity for him to get out there and continue to spread his word. And but yeah, I'm a big fan, and Alonzo's become a great friend over the years, and it's just really cool to see those two working together and doing big things and putting St. Louis on the map, for us. And
this whole experience was so cool for me because my background isn't in music. I've never been a part of the music community in any way other than just liking it. I've always been just like the guy in the audience. So I got to meet so many people and get a taste of the local music community and really go a little deeper than I ever have before. And it's just fascinating, the stuff that we have here. And again, everyone was so generous, no matter what genre, no matter what era we're talking about. People always were happy to share with me, and it felt like a family.
Yeah. That's my favorite part, is that everybody, how genuine and nice and just welcoming everybody is. I've met some lifelong friends through doing the show, and everybody's, so many great people. So
definitely.
Yeah. What do you think when you're curating all of this and you're going around talking to some of these folks and gathering these things, what do you have a particular piece that we talked, obviously the tinfoil is a huge one, but was a certain thing or anything that you really geeked out about the most, or anything?
The tinfoil was a huge moment. The Josephine Baker dress that we have on display really was again, talk about something that I got goosebumps when I first saw it. She is such a huge, important figure internationally. She was just, she's still getting honors and still being talked about today, and all the things she did. I just couldn't believe, I feel like you get a little jaded working at a museum like this. You see cool stuff a lot. And so it's easy to be like, oh yeah, there's Meriwether Lewis's telescope, or there's, something else. But that was one of those moments where it took my breath away when I saw that dress for the first time and realized Josephine Baker once wore this, and she, she was the guest of honor someplace, and this is what she chose to wear. That was a really cool one. But then I also love those artifacts from the more local musicians who didn't have that sort of international fame like that. So one of my favorites is a homemade skateboarding crew jacket that was made by Tim Jameson of Ultraman, who were a hardcore punk band from St. Louis in the 80s. And he talked so much when we met about just how radical it was to anything that wasn't Keishi, anything that wasn't mainstream in the early 1980s in St. Louis. And he would literally have people throwing sodas at him while he was skateboarding down the street. And I just think about for those sorts of stories, these were people who didn't have that sort of international fame backing them up. They were just doing what they believed to be true. And oftentimes their life was a little more difficult because of it. And so thinking about him actually making this jacket in his bedroom as a 15, 16-year-old kid, and being brave enough to go out and wear it. And he had this local scene of people he was involved with who were doing this sort of stuff. What it means to showcase those sorts of things too.
Sure.
That these were These were people who were believed so strongly in this music and the things they were a part of, how important a part of their life it was. I love those sorts of stories and those sorts of artifacts. Those often stick with me just as much as, seeing Miles Davis's trumpet or Chuck Berry's guitar.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned that, because the exhibit is also all encompassing. Like, it's we've just in this conversation we've talked mostly about the blues and jazz and ragtime, and because there is a lot of rich history of that in St. Louis here, but of course it is also you said there's punk part of it. There's the rock and roll. There's of course Chuck Berry and Ike and Tina Turner coming out. There's
Right.
There's even the stuff of the roots of origins of country music here, and then even to hip hop and coming out of, and gospel and everything else coming out of St. Louis. So
We knew right away that we were not going to be able to include everything. It
Right.
was a losing fight to think that we were somehow going to include all of the music St. Louis has
Yeah,
ever
sure.
made. I said, even if we had 10 galleries, we still would come up short. There's just too much. Equally, we didn't want this just to be a hall of fame with, some people in and some people out, where we're only focusing on the biggest names who had the most success. We wanted to treat this exhibit almost like a well-crafted album. You've got some greatest hits, you've got some deeper cuts, some novelty tunes, some unexpected stuff. We wanted a little bit of everything to sort of give a sense of St. Louis's richness. So it isn't just those genres that we are widely recognized in, like ragtime and the blues and even rock and roll. It's stuff like country music and punk rock and hip hop long before Nelly. There are huge stories to be told there, even though those aren't genres that St. Louis oftentimes gets mentioned in when you're talking about like a national scale look at country music or punk rock. So we wanted to really give that wide sense of what is here, both the famous stuff you've heard of and the not so famous that you might not have heard of. So it definitely, when people come, the first thing they're going to say is, I can't believe this person isn't in here. I can't believe this person isn't in here. But I think that just goes to show how much incredible music we have.
Mm-hmm.
There's always more that we could have talked about. There are always, huge bands that didn't get the fair representation they deserved probably in this exhibit. But that's just the nature of what we're trying to do. We're trying to cram 1,000 pounds of St. Louis sound into a small container.
Yep.
So we wanted to think of it almost like this is your introduction to the city's music. You can come spend an hour here, have a great time, and then go out and explore more on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think one of my favorite parts, the most surprising, I guess, was to learn that we mentioned the hip hop long before Nelly, was to find a picture of Tom Papa Ray.
That's right. Yeah.
And which, anybody that doesn't know, Tom's owner and operator of down at Vintage Vinyl. And I've seen him around at all sorts of different stuff and through over the years. I just didn't know that it existed and stuff. But I guess he helped finance or one of the first hip hop records out of St. Louis or something.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk. Nelly breaks huge in the 2000s and puts St. Louis hip hop becomes a thing nationally.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all these artists who come out after him, Chingy, Jaquan, Huey. It's sort of like hit after hit coming out of St. Louis. But, 2 decades before that, we already had exciting hip hop culture going on here, even though the St. Louis story is Nelly breaks St. Louis hip hop huge. So we wanted to focus in on that earlier hip hop history as well. And so one of the first ever releases from a local hip hop artist was Dangerous D and DJ Charlie Chan. They had a record called Power of Soul. And they were 2 teenagers from University City High School. And they walked into Vintage Vinyl one day and basically, like with the utmost confidence, said, we have an awesome hip hop record and you're going to make it for us. And Tom and Lou Price, then the co-owner of Vintage Vinyl, they were so impressed, they said, we'll do it. So they pressed this record. They only made like 500 copies. It never really got anywhere beyond the St. Louis region. But it's such an important moment, like those really early moments of what was happening here, because it goes to show that we had exciting musicians making all sorts of great music here, even if the record labels headquartered on the coast weren't looking for them. That's really the issue for a lot of these. It isn't that we didn't have the scenes, we didn't have the artists. It's that nobody from record labels was looking at St. Louis in the 1980s for much of anything. It was all New York or Los Angeles. So it's pretty cool to see that at least a little bit of that did make it onto vinyl, and we can actually still hear it today.
Yeah.
But I love those stories, because that's stuff people probably haven't heard much about before, and it paints a much more robust picture of hip hop in St. Louis. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, like you said, Nelly blew it up big time, and I even. I can't, maybe, I don't know. I'm not going to say I'm like the first or anything, but I think for my group of friends, like we were kind of some of the early ones to get a hold of Nelly, because I have a buddy whose brother was helped produce some of the beats and stuff that appear on Country Grammar, and so he was involved in the creation of some of this, so I remember getting like the sampler of like with Country Grammar and I think like Greed, Hate, and Envy.
Yeah.
And so like it was long before the actual record came out. It was just like a little sampler, 3-song sampler disc, and I remember like this song's great. This is gonna, and then all of a sudden like the next summer it's like you can. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
So
I had the same experience. It's like I remember exactly when that came out, and it just took over. And again, you see that time and time again with St. Louis artists. These aren't just artists that got popular, like Tina Turner, Chuck Berry, all the way back to Scott Joplin, Miles Davis, Nelly. They didn't just get popular. They completely redefined genres. Like after them, nothing is the same.
Yeah.
Nelly is one of the biggest hip hop stars, and we had this whole entire sound that sort of came out, that sort of St. Louis bounce sound. It just dominated everything through the early 2000s. And so that was fascinating. Like, we're not just talking about popular musicians, we're talking about musicians that changed things to come. Like every guitarist since has had to answer to Chuck Berry in some way or another. Miles Davis is undeniably, if not the most famous jazz musician of all time, one of the top few. So it's really amazing when you look at that, how we change genres. I mentioned early on, I feel like America would sound very different if St. Louis did not exist.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So just yesterday I watched Cruella.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that one yet, but I've been hearing a lot of it's a great movie, but the soundtrack, that's what everybody's like. The soundtrack's amazing. And so I finally watched the movie and checked out the soundtrack, and I was really surprised, and then really loved it. But there's 2 Ike and Tina Turner songs on it, and they're covers of Led Zeppelin's Whole Lotta Love and the Beatles' Come Together.
Nice.
And I mean, I know some Tina Turner obviously and stuff, but I'd never heard those 2 recordings.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool to see them, also put on that kind of a scale, put on a major movie, Cruella and everything else but it was fun to hear those recordings and hear those songs, and of course, like getting to walk through and see them in the exhibit and stuff too. So
yeah, and talk about someone who completely changed the sound to come. She really did, as much as the Rolling Stones or some of these other bands. She defined the sound of rock and roll. Her first record was A Fool in Love with Ike Turner, where she was actually singing the lead vocals. It was recorded right here in St. Louis at Technosonic Studios. When the owner of Sue Records, who produced the song, when he first heard it, he said her voice sounded like screaming dirt. That's such a visual explanation for me. But really, no one else was sounding like that. Right. And then the visuals to match it, that she was this tornado of whipped hair and mini skirt, and it's just an incredible musician, an incredible stage presence that she had. And again, came right out of North St. Louis and started her career here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty wild to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I think of, I grew up in Wentzville area, and I don't know that Chuck spent a lot of time there, but I I shared a property line with Chuck Berry at
his compound up there.
Yeah, and like, so it was, you know, I never like met the man at all. I always thought it was cool that you know, was that close to rock and roll history and stuff, like having.
Yeah.
I got to see him perform twice over the years, and I'm thankful that I saw a living, breathing piece of rock and roll history and stuff. And
yeah.
But it's I've since become friendly with his grandson, Charlie Berry III, and you know, so it's kind of fun too. Again, like same thing with Alonzo, getting to kind of still celebrate that legacy and that you know, lineage of you know, getting to know those guys and stuff, and so it's a lot of fun, man. But I remember thinking about Chuck. Like, I've heard stories of like from over the years, like so a guy I used to work with, he was telling me like all about parties. Like apparently, like that was, you know, there's a great story in the George Thorogood song, Back to Wentzville, and he says, cruising Highway Z, my coupe de ville, and it's like apparently that's all about going out to Chuck's house to party and stuff, and like, so I think that's fun too, that I live on Highway Z, and I, you know, it's like, so it's all, my home is all represented in the song and stuff, and like
rock famous now.
Yeah. And then, but like a guy I used to work with told me, it's like when he was a kid, like he would go party it was like the 70s or whatever. And like he said, like, you know, seeing Keith Richards out there, and I was just like, for me, when I grew up in Wentzville, there was nothing there. It was just like some boring little town. And I was just like, so weird to think about that, like Keith Richards and Chuck Berry and everybody partying here in St. Louis or in Wentzville and stuff. Yeah. And I was like, so crazy to think about the you know what, but that's sort of the fun. Again, I tell that because that's how I feel about St. Louis. I kind of started coming to St. Louis, getting to, you know, see these certain bands, and I just kind of thought when I was growing up here, like, this is a kind of a boring town, nothing really going on, and I realized quickly that I was way off. I had no idea what I was talking about. Yeah. And like, but when you're young, you have you know, you're not really aware of all this, and like, so that's what's been super cool about, you know, even this exhibit to a greater scale of that, but like getting to discover so much, and then like learning the history. Like, you know, there's really so many amazing things happened and currently happening in St. Louis, and
there really are, and I think that's, you know, I share some of that too. Like, as a kid, you don't realize sort of the richness around you. Yeah. You have a pretty limited worldview. And I think every kid probably thinks wherever they come from is boring, no matter where it is. Yeah. But I had that same, you know, mine started with architecture, right. You know, another subject where St. Louis has a wealth of incredible things to see. And it was cool that music is very similar for me in that sense. Like, I didn't realize what was here. I grew up in Afton, sort of in a pretty plain, you know, suburban house. And I would when I was a teenager and finally got my driver's license, I would take these little trips into the city and just like marvel at the buildings. I couldn't believe, like, why do they look like this? They look so different from where I come from in South County. And it really is, you know, like, we have so much here, and there's such richness and depth. You know, St. Louis is an old city, and we've seen the highest highs and lowest lows, and we've you know, had a little bit of everything. And I think that is made for a very rich place that I think a lot of people take for granted. And I hope more people will realize just what we have here, because it's a fascinating place, and I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you know, music's one. We've got so much. You know, food and everything. I mean, there's like so much to celebrate here in St. Louis, and I think this is this St. Louis Sound exhibit is a big, you know, flag, you know, like for everything. They just represent everything that we great about St. Louis music, and it's a good, like I was saying earlier, it's a good introduction, if nothing else, because hopefully that'll inspire people to keep digging and find their own stories along the way.
That's what we hope. Yeah.
But again, come out Tuesday through Sunday, free exhibit, open till 5 p.m. And you can come out and check it all out and take the tour and get to celebrate all of the History Museum too. But yeah.
Yeah, and we do have a huge lineup of really fascinating programming too. So we have all sorts of events going on, from like concerts in the museum to more like educational lecture type of stuff. The whole entire year this is going to be up. It doesn't close until January of 2023. That whole time we're planning on doing some really exciting events and programs here. And you can find all of those at www.mohistory.org. We have a big events calendar where you can look ahead for some of the cool stuff we have coming up.
Yeah.
But it's obviously an exhibit that lends itself to doing a lot of fun
Oh,
events.
yeah. Yeah.
So we're hoping to get loud here and get some concerts going and do some really cool stuff.
Yeah, you were saying that like you've had some of the people in the exhibit, like Bob Heil came out, and like I just think that's cool that they're also excited about being a part of this and stuff.
That's what's so fun too. The people I've gotten to meet, Murphy Lee did a concert on the lawn to open the exhibit, and I got to meet him and walk through the exhibit with Murphy Lee. And Bob Heil, Art Dwyer was in here the other day. The founder of the Soulard Blues Band. He's been on KDHX for more than 30 years. And it was cool just walking through with him, and you get to hear people's reminiscences and the things they remember from these time periods. John Hewlett, I got to bring through the exhibit already. So yeah, I'm hoping to only meet even more cool people as this is open.
Yeah, man, it's gonna be. I forgot about you guys had the kind of kickoff concert out the Funky Butt Brass Band and a bunch of my friends out there. So
we had a great weekend. That whole entire weekend was so much fun.
Yeah, that was I missed out on that. I was traveling, but that would have been a good party for sure. So
yeah.
But yeah, no, I can't wait to see what else comes with all this and what other exciting, a lot of great events coming up. So get involved and come out and learn a little bit more about some St. Louis sound over here. But Andrew, I thank you so much for doing this, man. It's been a lot of fun getting to meet you and getting to share some stories, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. Man.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Yeah. All right, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Rock Paper Podcast. Rock Paper Podcast. Rock Paper Podcast. Rock Paper Podcast.
Well, yeah, that was it.